Okay, so you want to own a piece of Coca-Cola. You picture the bottling plant, cans rattling down the line, trucks rolling out to every gas station and vending machine on the planet. 2.2 billion servings of Coca-Cola products consumed every single day in over 200 countries. Whoever owns this must be sitting on one of the greatest cash machines ever built. But here's the thing nobody tells you. The Coca-Cola company does not own the bottling plants, does not own the trucks, has never touched the can in your hand. What it actually sells is a syrup, a formula, and a name. The entire expensive job of turning that syrup into billions of cans belongs to someone else completely. Here's how strange that actually is. Coca-Cola works with roughly 225 independent bottling partners, running more than 950 production facilities, employing over 700,000 people worldwide. Companies like Coca-Cola, Euro-Pacific Partners, FEMSA, Arca Continental, Swire. Names you have probably never heard of, and yet they are the ones who buy the water, run the machinery, load the trucks, and knock on the door of your local grocery store. Coca-Cola ships them a concentrate. That's it. One tanker of concentrate can become nearly 2 million liters of finished drink, once a bottler adds water, sugar, carbonation, and packaging. Coca-Cola makes the syrup. Everyone else makes the Coke. And this wasn't always the arrangement. For decades, Coca-Cola actually owned a huge chunk of its own American bottling operation, a division called Coca-Cola Refreshments, which at one point handled around 80% of the company's bottle and can volume in the US. Then, starting around 2014, the company made a deliberate decision to get rid of almost all of it. Not sell off a struggling business. Sell off a business that worked on purpose. By the end of 2017, company-owned bottling volume in the US had dropped to about 3%, and the reason tells you everything about how this business actually thinks about money. Bottling is a brutal, capital-heavy business. Trucks depreciate. Plants need constant reinvestment. Fuel and aluminum and sugar prices swing hard. Margins in that part of the chain sit around 30%. Meanwhile, the concentrate business Coca-Cola kept for itself runs gross margins near 60%. So once the company handed the bottling weight to outside partners, its own operating margin jumped from roughly 23% to 34%, and gross margin climbed from 61% to 68%. Same drink, same customers. Completely different business once you separate who owns the syrup from who owns the trucks. Now think about what that means for a single can of Coke sitting in your hand. The actual concentrate inside it is a tiny fraction of the retail price. Most of what you're paying for is aluminum, water treatment, refrigeration, the delivery van that got it to the shelf space itself, and the bottler's thin margin on top of all of it. Coca-Cola collected its money the moment the syrup left the plant. Everything after that, every dollar of risk, every spike in aluminum prices, every fuel surcharge, belongs to a bottler in Mexico City or Manila or Madrid, not to the company whose name is on the can. So if the syrup isn't the real product, what is Coca-Cola actually selling? The answer is the same thing it has been selling since 1886. A feeling wrapped around a formula that isn't even that well protected. Only 2 people inside the company are said to know the complete recipe, and famously, they're not allowed to fly on the same plane. It's a great story. It's also, by the company's own quiet admission, more of a marketing device than an actual trade secret. Because even if a rival stole every drop of that formula tomorrow, they still couldn't legally call it Coca-Cola, still couldn't touch the branding, still couldn't buy into 140 years of shelf space and muscle memory. The mystique does more work than the chemistry, and Coca-Cola spends accordingly. $4 billion on advertising in 2025 alone. Not to tell you Coke tastes good, you already know that, but to keep the brand sitting at the top of your mind before you even feel thirsty. That spending is a big reason the brand itself is valued at somewhere north of $80 billion, one of the most valuable names on earth, completely separate from any factory or truck the company owns. This is the real moat, not the recipe. The fact that Coca-Cola has spent a century making sure that when you think cold drink, you think of them first, in whatever language you speak. Here's where the two halves of this business meet. The brand pulls people to the product. The bottler network gets the product into their hand, everywhere, fast and cheap enough to keep buying. Coca-Cola's job is demand. The bottler's job is logistics. And because Coca-Cola owns the demand side, it holds almost all the leverage. It can raise concentrate prices. It can restructure a territory. It can walk away from an underperforming partner. The bottler, who just sank hundreds of millions into plants and fleets, cannot easily walk away from Coca-Cola. None of this makes the model risk-free. Coca-Cola still buys sugar and sweeteners at global commodity prices, and those prices move. It still depends on bottlers who face their own aluminum and fuel cost pressure, which eventually filters back into how much shelf space and marketing support those bottlers can afford. And there's a slower, more structural threat sitting underneath all of it. The world is quietly turning against sugar. Soda taxes have spread through dozens of cities and countries. Consumer habits are shifting toward water, coffee, and energy drinks. Coca-Cola has been fighting this by buying and building outside the core cola business. Costa Coffee, Powerade, Minute Maid, an equity stake in an energy drink company, turning itself from a soda company into what its executives now call a total beverage company. It's a hedge against its own core products slowly falling out of fashion. So what does actually owning a piece of this look like? You cannot buy a Coca-Cola bottling franchise the way you might buy into a McDonald's. Those territories are already locked up by giant established regional players. What you can do is buy the stock, ticker symbol KO, on the New York Stock Exchange. And this is where Coca-Cola quietly becomes one of the strangest success stories in the entire market. It has raised its dividend every single year for 64 years straight through recessions, wars, and every market crash in between, earning it a spot among a tiny handful of companies called dividend kings. Since 2010 alone, it has paid out close to $102 billion to shareholders. Warren Buffett has held the stock since 1988 and has never sold a share. It will not make you rich overnight. Its beta sits around 0.35, meaning it barely flinches when the rest of the market panics. What it offers instead is something rarer, a business that has figured out how to collect a toll on human thirst in almost every country on the planet, without ever touching a drop of the product itself. And that's really the whole story of Coca-Cola. It looks like a beverage company. It behaves like a licensing company. The bottlers carry the weight, the risk, and the capital. Coca-Cola carries the formula, the name, and almost all the margin. Ray Kroc once turned McDonald's into a real estate company disguised as a burger chain. Coca-Cola did something quieter and, in some ways, even smarter. It turned itself into a company that sells thirst and let everyone else fight over the right to satisfy it.